Beloved, obviously this weekend is Palm Sunday as we find ourselves moving into Holy Week. One of the classic readings in the lectionary for this week is the triumphal entry, as it's called, of Jesus into Jerusalem. Luke 19, verses 28 to 40, records that incident, and Luke invites us to look at some very clear particulars because of the nature of the unfolding of the narrative of the story of Israel. Without a background of what leads up to the events of the triumphal entry based on the history of Israel, it would be very difficult to really begin to unpack what Luke is talking about. Luke's audience is being made aware, it's a Gentile audience that's being made aware of the Jewish roots, the messianic roots of the expectations of when Messiah would come, that he would bring a kingdom and would establish shalom from sea to sea and to the ends of the earth, and he would break off the war chariot from Jerusalem and the bow from Ephraim, this whole promise of peace and no more war. And Zechariah is very clear about that. And yet, the scriptures also reveal that this Messiah will not come into Jerusalem on a steed like a conqueror. Rather, he will come on an unridden colt, the foal of a female and her firstborn colt. And Luke tells us this story in detail, the commissioning of the disciples to go into the village and untie the colt and bring it to Jesus. Luke makes it very clear that when these things are taking place, he has prepared the disciples 3 months prior, from the time of the confession of Peter on into his journey from Caesarea Philippi through Samaritan territory, and then into Jerusalem as his final place, because a prophet cannot die except in Jerusalem. He's already told them that. And yet, in the midst of this, there are going to be multitudes waving palm branches in expectation of the fulfillment of the Feast of Tabernacles, because that's where the palm branches come from. They're also going to be shouting and singing the great Hallel from Psalm 118, O Hosanna in the highest, save us in the highest. And the Pharisees are going to rebuke Jesus and tell him to stop the multitudes from crying out. And yet Jesus is going to allow all of this to go on and even allow the conception that he was going to conquer the enemies in a political way to go unaddressed in terms of the multitudes. This is important because the disciples haven't gotten it, they don't see it, and those outside don't see it, and the Pharisees clearly don't see him as Messiah. They want him dead. And yet Jesus goes into Jerusalem, riding on a gentle donkey, an unridden firstborn colt that has been dedicated to Yahweh, essentially. And when Jesus comes into the city and they're singing the great Hallel, they're waving their palm branches, they're laying their garments on the ground, and they are saying, Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, and the coming kingdom of David. So there are deep, deep expectations of the kingdom coming. And yet, at the height of what we can call the triumphal entry, Jesus, like Jeremiah, weeps over the city of Jerusalem and says that how he would have longed to gather them as a hen gathers her nursing chicks, but they would not. And they did not discern that their time of visitation had come. And in weeping over the city, he prophesies the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. And he goes straight into the temple, and he cleanses the temple a second time. He cleanses it the first time in John 2:19. Now, there are many conservative scholars that will tell you that it's only one cleansing of the temple, and they have their reasons. However, I share the argument with other scholars who contend that there are indeed differences between the cleansing of the temple in John's Gospel and the cleansing of the temple in Matthew and Mark and Luke's account for various specific reasons. The cleansing of the temple goes back to an understanding of the consecration of the high priest and the book of Leviticus, and the understanding of what it meant to cleanse the temple and consecrate it. And in the first cleansing of the temple, Jesus said, "Stop making my Father's house a house of robbers or a den of thieves." He is our great high priest. And he comes in as the high priest and sees the merchandising in the temple. He overturns the tables of the money changers, and he casts out the money sellers. He makes a scourge of cords. And he says, "Stop making my Father's house, a den of thieves." In the cleansing of the temple in Luke, in Matthew, we have a little bit of a different scenario. Because this is the high priest cleansing the temple the second time and declaring that it is corrupt. And he goes on to say, "My Father's house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations. Your house will be left to you desolate." He pronounces judgment over Jerusalem. He pronounces the end of the temple system in AD 70, and he lets them know that the house that they are worshiping in has been condemned and will be left desolate, but the house that his Father is building is going to be a house of prayer for all the nations, in fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy, in fulfillment of Zechariah's prophecy. And the only way that house can be built is on the foundation of the blood of the Lamb, who died for us, that he might bring us into participation with him in relationship to the Father. And we are Christ's house, as he is the new temple, and we are being built as living stones into and fashioned as a habitation of God in the Spirit. There's so much in Luke's account that is worthy of our contemplation. I want you to just take some time and consider these thoughts as we prepare to celebrate just how much of a victory was going to take place and on the way in Messiah's triumphal entry on a gentle colt that was dedicated as a firstborn male to Yahweh, and how Jesus, the Prince of Shalom, who embodies the absence of all things harmful and the presence of all things beneficial, ushers in, by disarming principalities and powers at the cross, an entirely new day of the Spirit, and brings to an end that which was the economy under Moses by fulfilling it in himself, not only as high priest, but also as the sacrifice, once for all, for the sins of the world, and now ever lives at the right hand of the Father to make intercession for us, and also to fulfill his mission, that to the ends of the earth, that the knowledge of the glory of the Lord will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea, through a company of men and women, living stones that bear witness to and in and with the Prince of Shalom, that we might say to others, "Come on home. The Father loves you. He has reconciled you to himself in his Son. Come and join the celebration." It's going to be a great day on Sunday. I'm looking forward to fellowshipping with all of you. I'm looking forward to breaking bread together. I'm looking forward to breaking the word of life and watching God move in a significant way. Bring somebody with you. It's going to be a great day. I love you. We'll see you Sunday.